بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي ربي يسر ولا تعسر اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. It's a very important topic today regarding Palestine. Inshallah, we will analyze how this land, this holy land, is connected to our future, and uh, for the acquisition of this land, how they acquired the land, what was played historically. There was a lot of religious movement, religious literature that was written basically in the name of Bible and Judaism, and that convinced people that this is, there's going to be a kingdom of the future kingdom where Jews and Christians need to strive for this holy land, the land of Israel. So what happened there? And so for the pretext of that, I want to connect people. And basically, people forget when they talk about, there's so much propaganda. They think Israel is connected, Jews are connected to this holy land and Christians also. But they forget that the religious tradition of Islam, how in the ahadith of end times and in a lot of ahadith, this land is so emphasized that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, as we learned in the first two, especially the first one, where we learned the significance of the land of Barakah, Sham, and the Bayt al-Maqdis, the Holy Land. We learned that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam emphasized Sahaba to go and travel to Sham and stay in Sham and Yemen. So there were two places where it was emphasized and advised by our Holy Prophet to go and take, to live in, to basically reside in permanently. And that's why Sahaba traveled extensively. And there's so many Sahaba after the conquest of Bayt al-Maqdis who traveled to Bayt al-Maqdis and made it their home, the permanent home. And then there were Sahaba who were traveling back and forth, and among them were Abdullah ibn Umar, and then there were so many imams, and then the family of Abu Darda, Darda, they were the faqih, they were the family who was living there, and then there were Sahaba, and some of the Sahaba's graves are still there. Just behind Masjid al-Aqsa is Bab al-Rahma, the graveyard, the Qabristan of Bab al-Rahma, where a lot of Sahaba are buried, and in them is Ubadah ibn Samit, and Hazrat Ubaidah bin Jarrah, who was actually a martyr of the Ta'un of Amwas, the plague of Amwas, and he was brought there and buried there. So why did they travel there? Because they knew that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has told them to take residence in the Holy Land. And not only in that part of at that time, at very particular time in history, at that point, it was important. It is going to be important throughout history. So it's not just for that time, it's till the end of times. So now please move on to the first slide. So now we're going to see that just a few ahadiths out of so many ahadiths. I've just chosen few ahadiths that will emphasize that why is that land important, and this land is always going to be in jihad and ribat. So we know what happened. A lot of you know that what happened, but there was a lot of conquest that took place, and battles that took place in that land. So we will just quickly look at that as well, and then we're going to see what the hadiths of our Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam say about that land. So the first hadith is the hadith of from Shaddad ibn Aus. He was Shaddad ibn Aus al-Ansari. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said to him that he was unwell. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is visiting him, and he's giving him a glad tiding, a bushra, a good news, that he asked him what was wrong with you, Shaddad. He answered that the world is closing on me. So he thought he probably will pass away, he will die. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, no, don't worry, Asham will be conquered. And at that time, when Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is speaking, the Sham is under the Roman control, is in the hand of the Romans, and it was conquered later on in the time of Hazrat Umar. So he said, do not worry, Asham will be conquered and Bayt al-Maqdis will be conquered, and you and your sons will be imams there, which was fulfilled. So what the next hadith is, the hadith of Abu Hurairah, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that a group of my ummah will not cease to fight at the gates of Damascus and at the gates of Bayt al-Maqdis and its surroundings. The betrayal or desertion of whoever deserts them will not harm them in the least. They will remain victorious until the final hour comes. Now, this is not going to happen once. This is going to happen throughout history, because that land, as we learned in the previous sessions, that this land is the land of barakah and blessing. So it's strategically very important. The two lands that Allah talk about, that they are blessed lands, they're holy lands. Obviously, one we learned, and there's also the barakah is also in Sham, is also in Yemen. So you can see they're both strategically very important. They're the trade routes, all the trade routes pass through them. So and it's also holy to the Christians and also holy to the Jews. And we're going to learn about what happened with the Crusades. So you can see that this is going to happen throughout history. It's not going to happen only once, or just in the time of Prophet. It happened later on many times. So please move on to the next slide. So this next hadith is also about the Ribaat of Sham, the Holy Land of Sham and the Ribaat of Sham. So what is Ribaat? Ribaat is basically guarding the frontier of a place that's important for the Muslims. So now it's it's not just Sham or Bayt al-Maqdis. Anywhere you stand guard. You guarding the place in the way of Allah. You are standing Ribaat. So there's the fadail, the virtues of Ribat on the left side here. You can read them, that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam gave them a lot of rewards. There's a lot of reward for the people who stand in the Ribat. A place in Jannah is as small as the whip of your house, is far better than the world and all it contains, and it's far better from fasting the days of Ramadan and performing prayers at its night. So this is talking about Ribat. So observing Ribat for a month is far better from fasting for a lifetime. Observing Ribat and whoever dies in Ribat in the way of Allah will be protected from the great terror, granted provision from paradise morning and evening, and reward to guarding the it's just a little bit cut off. Rewarding for guarding the frontiers of a land. So and there's another hadith that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, this is also from Abu Darda, related that Messenger of Allah said, from Asham to the furthest point of Upper Mesopotamia, the inhabitants therein, along with their wives, children, and servants, are in a state of ribat. Now, what does that mean? People who go and reside there, who are just living there, they choose like the places like which are the frontiers. Now you're going to learn about Gaza and that part of Palestine as well, because when someone comes from the Mediterranean, they are going to face, the first place you're going to face are the coastal cities of Palestine. So obviously, and also the part of Syria that faces the sea, and the part of Lebanon that faces the sea, and the part of Palestine that faces the sea. So this all land is very important, and people who just go and live there with this intention, they are in the state of ribat all the time. So that's why people of Gaza were in state of ribat, and now they're in state of jihad, active jihad right now. So and then whoever occupies the land therein is in ribat. And whoever occupies any frontier therein from any frontier is in jihad. Please move on to the next slide. So now you've learned the importance of jihad and ribat, just particularly in Bayt al-Maqdis. So now I've added a map of Palestine to point out where Gaza is right now, and then I've circled Asqalan. So now there's a particular hadith. It's very interesting, and it's so relevant to our times as well, that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said. It's a part of a long hadith, so I'm just going to mention only that part. It's that hadith that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أول هذا الأمر نبوة ورحمة ثم يكون خلافة ورحمة. So after Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, there will be like khilafah, and then there will be monarchy, and then there will be very tyrants, a lot of tyrants will come. So the end of hadith is that ثم يتكادمون عليه تكادم الحمر فعليكم بالجهاد. So the Nabi is emphasizing people for jihad. فإن أفضل جهادكم الرباط. So the best of jihad will be ribat. So now you've learned what is ribat, standing guard and fighting at the frontiers. So the best form of jihad is al-ribat, وَإِنَّ أَفْضَلَ رِبَاطُكُمْ عَسْكَلَانِ, and the best ribat is the ribat of Asqalan. I'm really sorry, I was supposed to put the translation of this hadith as well, but it's cut off. I think I'll share it later in the group, inshallah. So the best ribat is the ribat of Asqalan. So what is Asqalan? I've circled this on the left side of the map. Marine, if you can see, you can use a cursor to, yeah, this one. This is Asqalan. This is an old map. So this area was called Asqalan, but also Gaza is mentioned. So Gaza was part of Asqalan at that time. It was also called Gaza to Asqalan. Right, so the larger area was Asqalan, but later on, as the demarcations take place, the places are changed, the names are sometimes changed, but mainly the region stayed the same. So now on the right side of the map, the whole region is called Gaza. So this Palestine map is the original Palestine map in 1946, before Israel took over. So it was divided into Palestinian districts. So Gaza was a district and Asqalan was the region. So now Israel has taken over Asqalan, and they've named it Ashkelon according to the Hebrew tradition. So they named it Ashkelon, but it's called Asqalan. Asqalan is still a place in Palestine, and which comes under the Gaza district. So it's particularly mentioned in Hadiths. It's very interesting that the best ribat is the ribat of Asqalan. Now you see where the people of Gaza stand right now. Please move on to the next slide. Now, I've included this ribat of Masjid al-Aqsa. Now, according to the fatwa of the scholars of Bayt al-Maqdis and that region, they have said that they invite people, the unarmed civilians, the normal people, to come and pray in Masjid al-Aqsa because it's under occupation. And it's obviously we know that there's Israeli soldiers and Israeli police 24/7 guarding the doors of Masjid al-Aqsa. Muslims, it's very hard for Muslims to enter and leave, and after post 7th October it's even harder because there is they've limited the age group. They only let old people go in there. So they had made, historically, like in the early 2000s, when the second intifada happened. We will talk about the intifada, inshallah, the uprising. So what happened was they felt a need of constant presence of Muslims inside Masjid al-Aqsa. So they made groups. So they made different type of groups. They made study groups which will come and study in inside Masjid al-Aqsa. So there's certain masatib are like the raised platforms where people used to sit in the old times and study. So they were called the masatib al-ilm, and the terraces of knowledge. This program was launched and it increased the number of Masjid al-Aqsa visitors, and then that's when the ribat emerged publicly. So, and then people used to come from far off places, and then there were students who were visiting Masjid al-Aqsa more often to be part of those study groups, and to encourage every movement, every way to people to come and visit Masjid al-Aqsa. So they were called, and the people who actively stay there and guard the place are called murabitin and murabitat. So there's an active group, especially it's a group of women, and you will see them, whoever follows the news of Masjid al-Aqsa in Palestine, you see them in the news. These women, on the left side is the picture. Israel actually released this list was called they named a group of people who who were named, who stand guard in Masjid al-Aqsa constantly, and they're arrested multiple times. Sometimes they're banned to enter Masjid al-Aqsa, sometimes banned for months, sometimes banned for years. And one of the top notable figures in them is our sister Hanadi Halwani. You can see her hair in white scarf. She was also in the video that I played last time. And then the sister next to her in pink scarf, she is also another very active sister in Ribat and Masjid al-Aqsa. They constantly, physically harassed. They put in jails. Sanadi Halwani was in jail for a very long time. Then she was barred to enter Masjid al-Aqsa. So these are the real fighters, the heroes of the nation right now, of Islam right now, who are actively in the form of Ribat. Please move on to the next slide. Now, this was, just to emphasize the importance of Ribat and Jihad in that very land. Now, this land is also related to the future return of Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, and some are, they're connected to the hadith of black flags. though a lot of our hadiths of black flags, the coming from the Khorasan are weaker, very weak. But then in this, I'm gonna quote one hadith which, okay, it is.
Yeah, Sister Hafsa is about to come back because she has a small child along with her. So she'll be joining back soon.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm sorry, I just got dropped off there. So we will begin with this hadith of Hazrat Isa ibn Maryam returning in Damascus and then eventually killing Dajjal. So it's a very long hadith. I'm going to read from the part that's relevant to us. So it's actually interesting to read the whole hadith, I think. So and Nawas ibn Sam'an. So this is the hadith from Nawas ibn Sam'an al-Kilabi. And he narrates, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "If Dajjal comes forth while I am amongst you, then I shall dispute with him on your behalf. Now, but if he comes after I'm not with you, a man must dispute on his own behalf. And Allah will protect every Muslim. Those of you who live up to his time should recite over him the opening verses of Surah Al-Kahf, for they are your protection from his trial." We asked, how long will he remain on earth? He replied, 40 days, one day like a year, one like a month, and one like a week, and the rest of his days like yours. And then we asked, will one day's prayer suffice us in the day, which will be like a year? He replied, no, you must make an estimate of its extent. Then Isa, son of Maryam, will descend at the white minaret to the east of Damascus. He will then catch up at Dajjal at the gate of Lud and kill him. Now, this is about Hazrat Isa. It's a long hadith. This hadith has many narrations. In some hadiths, and in similar hadiths, there's also the part that I mentioned before, that the Dajjal cannot enter 4 places, 4 mosques. 2 of them are Haramain, the Mecca and Medina, Masjid al-Rasul and Kaaba. These are the 2, Haramain, and then Masjid al-Aqsa, and then Masjid al-Tur. So these 4 places he cannot enter. So and now here we know that Hazrat Isa alayhi salam will eventually kill Dajjal in Lud. Now where is Lud? Lud is in modern day Palestine. It's just not very far from Beit al-Maqdis, the city of Jerusalem. It's called Lid in Arabic, and also Bab al-Lud, and then Lod in English. So that's the very place Hazrat Isa. So we should know that where is Dajjal going to be killed? He is going to be killed in the Holy Land, rather than, you hear about the temple and the rule of Dajjal and, Antichrist and all this. So we should know what's coming from our from our Islamic tradition. This is a Sahih Hadith of Abu Dawud. So I mentioned 4 hadiths, the Masjid al-Tur. It's where the Tur mountain is. There's also a masjid there, and Tur has a lot of importance. And it's also, we know that all the wahi came on Musa alayhi salam. He met Allah there. Allah spoke to him from Masjid al-Tur. By met Allah, I mean Allah spoke to him. That's why Musa alayhi salam is Kalimullah. And then Hazrat Isa is also going to take his followers to protect from, Yajuj and Majuj. Where is he going to take? On this Tur mountain. Please get down. Okay, let's please move on to the next slide. Now, these are some hadiths of black flags. The one on the right is an authentic one. The one on the left is from the Kitab al-Fitan, and I've included quite a few, but they are very weak. But the first one here, three will fight on one another for your treasure. Each one of them, the son of Caliph, but none of them will gain it. Then the black banners will come from the east, and they will kill you in an unprecedented manner. So now this is about the fight of three brothers of Arabia. So where your for your treasure. So Imam Ibn Kathir has said this treasure means the Kaaba. So there will be a fight in the in the royal family. Basically, it sounds like the royal family. What I've heard from ulama, and then they will fight over this place, like who's going to be the custodian there. And then the black flag will come from there. Now, this is authentic, but the other one here, surely black flags will appear from Khorasan until the people under the leadership of this flag will tie their horses with the olive trees between Beit Lahiya and Harasta, named this is near Beit al-Maqdis. And but this hadith is weak. Please move on to the next slide. Now, we do get a part of black flags in an authentic hadith, but the rest of our hadiths are not. They're deemed weak. So to mention is important that we should know that there are hadiths. One of them is a sound hadith, and then the ones are weak. Please move on to the next slide. Okay, so this is an important hadith, but it's considered weak though. But this says that the black flag will emerge from Khorasan, and nothing will repel them until they are set up in Elia. This was very widely popularly quoted by Dr. Israr as well, that the black flags from Khorasan will come and they will be set up in Elia. Elia is the name of Beit al-Maqdis, Jerusalem, at the time of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And Elia was named Elia by the Romans at that time. They called it their colony Elia Capitolina. So that's why it was called Elia. And it's used in Hadith as well. Please move on to the next slide. So that's how it connects to our future as well. Because a lot of future events are going to take place there. And a lot of scholars conclude that the future, the future Khilafah and that's going to be set up by Isa alayhi salam and Imam al-Mahdi is going to be from Beit al-Maqdis. But obviously, Hazrat Isa is going to rule the whole world. So it's not a problem where he rules from, but it is connected to our future and our future Khilafah. Please move on to the next slide. Now, before we start looking into how the state of Israel was created, there's a lot of background and context to it. We're going to summarize it, but look at the brief important events and the points which will make us understand that how did this Zionism started and what was Christian Zionism and where are the roots of Christian Zionism. So I will read, before we even talk about the Crusades, I will read a paragraph that the British imperialists succeeded where others failed. Now, it's talking about the imperialism, the colonies that were created, as we Pakistanis know that we were part of a British colony, and then Palestine was part of a British mandate when the Ottoman Empire was coming to an end, and the Britain was colonizing, and the French were colonizing, and the Italians and the Portuguese and Spanish. And you should know that any country that goes on to colonize another country, another land, they use some form of religious motivation or religious texts to basically validate or motivate and so did the Christian, and similarly did the Jews. They distort the text, they quote it out of context. For that they need books, for that they need clergy and the rabbis and the popes and churches and people who are writing to mislead the people or to convince the people for what they're doing. So The British imperialists succeeded where others failed. Following centuries of Western attempts to reoccupy the Holy Land, Britain succeeded on take advantage of the situation when it was ripe. Exploiting both Jewish and Arab nationalism as well as other imperialist powers in achieving its goal, the British establishment, although influenced by the idea of restoration of Jews as a prelude to the coming of Messiah, tried to keep a distance from such propaganda and officially focus on its imperialist goals. To Britain, the Jews were seen as a useful tool in the hands of imperialist powers, both for trade and military support in the region, as well as fulfilling the biblical prophecy. Now, this is a very small part of an article that was given to us of our teacher. It's a little booklet. It's very important read. Inshallah, I'll try to share the link in the book in the group. It's very useful if you read. Now, when I read that in the beginning, now you will understand how it's connected to the Crusades, and then it's connected to the Jewish beliefs and the Christian beliefs. So you know how Crusades were. They were very, very brutal, very terrorizing battles, and they started in the in the late 11th century. Yeah, in the 11th century, you can say. And there was a zeal in the Christian world that we should redeem the Holy Land and we should take it, and the Muslim empire was expanding. So they wanted to stop the Muslim empire, expansion of Muslim empire, and take back the Holy Land and Jerusalem as its capital. So you see, the roots of taking Jerusalem as the capital is basically a Christian idea. So here is a little summary about the 8 crusades that were fought between 1096 to 1099. And then, who stopped these crusades eventually was Salahuddin. And Salahuddin spent, there's not a lot of time here to, talk about Salahuddin, but one of the most important and central characters in the whole history of Islam is Salahuddin, who fought with his own people his whole life, like to unify the Muslim world. He fought with the rebellions, the people who the traitors, a lot of traitors, because the Crusaders had spread a big network, and then there was weakness and disunity among the Muslims. And actually, there's a story coming to my mind that was told to us by our teacher. I think it's very important that I should quote it here. It was actually not part of this today, but I will quote it. It's very important. So, when the Crusaders took over Jerusalem, and it fell to the Christians, and the Muslims were kicked out, they were killed. There was so much blood in the streets of Jerusalem that the horses' knees, the feet and the knees of the horses were drenched, were in the blood. It was the blood of the Muslims, and who were residing in the Holy Land after the conquest of Umar radiallahu anhu. And it was quite a lot of generations had passed, so they could not stop, and Muslims were weak at that time, and it was taken over. And it was the time of the Abbasi Khalifa, and the Abbasids, Baghdad was the seat of the Abbasid Caliphate. And the Muslims who are left alive from the who managed to to run away from the swords of the Crusaders, they marched to Damascus, and they tell them what happened there, and then from there the ulama decide to go to the Caliph in Baghdad. So it was Ramadan at the time. They marched, they reached Baghdad, and they see that the Caliph is busy in the parties, in the Ramadan, party, and nobody really cares what happened to Bayt al-Maqdis. So it's not very different from the story we are looking at now. It's not the first time that it happened. So and then he wants to talk to. He said, "I want to talk in the Masjid al-Jami." So the Friday khutbah comes. He wants to talk to the people, and then he's there, and everybody, they announce it. So he was Imam al-Harawi. So Imam al-Harawi from Damascus marches to Baghdad, goes on to the pulpit on the day of Friday, and he goes on the pulpit, and he sees that nobody's really bothered who he is and why is he here, because they knew why is he here and what was he going to talk about. So He goes on the pulpit, he takes a glass of water and he breaks his fast. And everybody, there's pin drop silence, everybody's stunned. What happened? And they are like so surprised, like how can this imam, this scholar, and this person, like not even an ordinary person would do that? Why would he break his fast? So and then he says he does this to get his attention. Now they're ready to listen to what he's going to say. He said, now this is the fard. I broke my fast, so this is everybody knows that this is a sin. But then this is a fard that you think the roda is fard on me, and I broke my roda. And then um, the fard upon the ummah right now, the fard upon the Khalif right now is to take over, to take back the Holy Land, which is the fard on you. And I broke my fast. I what were you going to say? Like, he committed a sin. You think this sin is bigger, but that sin is far more bigger than this. So this is how he manages to get his message across. And then there was someone sitting in his meeting at that time, and that he gets the message across. And then there was a little foundation, you can say, at that time. It starts a century later. Beit al-Maqdis was taken back. So it takes a lot of work. So now there were 3 generations of Nuruddin Zangi, Imaduddin Zangi, and then his son Nuruddin Zangi, who was the mentor of Salahuddin. And he prepared for Salahuddin his whole life, and himself as well. They fought a lot of fights, they did a lot of jihad all their lives, and they're both very pious. So was Imaduddin, and Nuruddin Zangi was a very pious leader. And he was the leader of Aleppo and Halab at that time. And they knew that this is a very key area. So they unified the area, they protected. And that time they were very, the kings of Aleppo and the kings of Halab, the princes of Halab, they were not very, interested in the issues of the Ummah. So they fought with them. And then eventually there was Fatimids in Egypt, who were obviously the Shiite, and it's very hard to unite, but Salahuddin manages to unite them as well. He played, because he was a very good strategist, he was a very good military person, he was very clever, and Allah had prepared him. So he never used to eat properly. And people used to say, why don't you eat? And he said, how can I eat when Bayt al-Maqdis is in the control of the Crusaders? How can I eat? Then we know a lot of stories of the conquest of Salahuddin, of the Crusaders. But that Crusaders' zeal, that Crusader mentality never ended, and it continued. So that at the when in the 14th century, there was a lot of chaos going on in Europe. The Christian church was failing. There was fight of the people and the church was falling weak. So the people were thinking like the mission of the church won't be accomplished. So one of them was Christopher Columbus. We've heard of Christopher Columbus. Let's read this and then we move on to the Christopher Columbus. So the main aim of the Crusaders the primary objectives were to stop the expansion of Muslim states, to reclaim for Christianity the Holy Land in the Middle East, and to recapture territories that had formerly been Christian. Now, many participants also believed that undertaking what they saw as a holy war was means of redemption and a way of achieving expiation of sins. So obviously the popes tell them, their masters and the pastors tell them that your sins will be forgiven. And then for Crusaders, they made a lot of such announcements in the whole kingdom, in the whole of Europe. The different nations, they said your sins will be forgiven, you will be given this, you will be given property, you will be given a sound future. So the people used to go, and it was considered an honor to go and fight for crusades. Please move on to the next slide. Any soldier who ever went for crusade was considered very honorable. So it was a sign of nobility as well to go do something for the crusades. Now there's a book written by this Carol Delaney, and she writes about a different aspect of Christopher Columbus's life and what his real motivation was, because at that time in the late mid 15th century, 14 something, and then towards the 1500, around 1500 something, Christopher Columbus, discovered America. Just before that, the Constantinople had fallen to the Muslims. So Muslims conquered that part of Turkey, which is now Istanbul, and so their hopes were even going, people who were like Christians, very you can say extremists, or maybe very devout Christians. They could not take it, and then there was Inquisition in Spain at that time. Muslims were kicked out of Spain. They were murdered. They were they were forced to accept the religion, and so there was a lot happening at that time. So the Christopher Columbus leaves Spain, and then it was the advice of Isabella and King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain after Reconquista, that you have to find more treasure. We need more gold. We need to make the church strong again, and we need to recapture the Holy Land. So that was the motivation of Christopher Columbus. And there's a book, and in the book she takes the personal note from the personal diary and the memoirs of Christopher Columbus, that what his motivation was. So Delaney situates the Columbus's religious motivation within the apocalyptic and crusading mindset of the 15th century. This context strengthens her claim that Columbus's mission was shaped by a desire to reclaim Jerusalem and prepare for second coming of Christ, resonating with what historians know about Christian eschatology of the era. So you can see, this apocalyptic mindset, that the world is going to end and the Messiah is going to come. And this is in every religion. But how you use this and how it has been used throughout centuries. I mean, it was used by Crusaders, and then you see there was Salahuddin who fought them. And then later Mamluks kept on fighting Crusaders. They kept coming. And finally, they destroyed, the land we talk about, Ascalon, and the other coastal cities, Jaffa and Akka. There was a lot of Crusader fortification in that area, and they kept attacking, so they kept coming. And so the Mamluks and even Salahuddin and Ayyubid, the later Ayyubid dynasty, they destroyed that fortification of those cities. So the Crusaders have no place here. So if they come, they can't recapture and they can't take over. So you can still see in those cities the ruins of those fortification and parts of the forts that was built at that time, and they were captured by Salahuddin. So you see the motivation of Columbus. So the book is also called The Columbus and the Quest for Jerusalem. So they wanted money and they wanted treasure. So his mission was, the Columbus set forth on his voyage with the intention to deliver a letter to the Grand Khan from Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. So the Grand Khan of China. So China was at that time, the Chinese ruler was pro-Christian. So they wanted to continue trade with them. They wanted to find alternate trade routes, because it was all in the hand of Muslim at that time. The Egypt, the Palestine, Syria, Lebanon. This was the trade route and part of the Silk route that would reach from China to all the way to Europe. Now, the Europe had done a lot of, what happened during Inquisition in Spain. So the things with Muslims were not working very well, and they wanted to have, they were looking for alternate trade routes as well. So you connect all these dots, and that will add up to, the creation of the State of Israel. And so the king and queen sent him and to set up a trading post to trade for gold and spices he had read about in Marco Polo's book. The stated purpose of that trade was to obtain enough gold to finance a crusade to take Jerusalem from then Muslim occupiers as a prerequisite to rebuilding the temple of Christ's return before the end of the world, which he believed was imminent. So he believed that Christ is going to come. We have to build his temple. So it's coming from a Christian. So now, obviously, the church was falling in Europe, and there was Protestants who were against the Catholic, the sect of the Christians that was basically against the, beliefs of the Pope, giving complete authority to the popes, and popes giving, forgiveness, distributing forgiveness like this. So they said, we don't believe in that. And then when after the Christopher Columbus's voyage to America, and then British and Europeans going and colonizing America, there was the Protestantism was the the main Christians at that time in America were Protestants. So this idea, you can see in the roots of America, there was this idea. And then we're going to see what happens next. Please move on to the next slide. Now, Christian Zionism and evangelical Christians. Now, how did these Christians get, why are we discussing this? Because we know that America is supporting the state of Israel. So is Britain. And so is a lot of other European countries. So they have their own military and political interests. But what is the other reason? How did the Christians, they say saying anything to the Jews means you're anti-Semitic, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism. And if you commit anti-Semitism, you're bringing the wrath of God upon you. These are the words that are quoted by their pastors and their, ministers. And these people really think that they have to support the state of Israel. And if there are documentaries about it, I will inshallah quote the documentary names that you can go and watch how these now evangelical Christians are the Protestants. You can say it's some of a majority of the Protestantism is evangelical Christians are the Protestant Christians, and they how did they get convinced with this idea of Zionism of Jews' right in the Holy Land and the return of Messiah and everything. So there was a person called John Nelson Darby. He was British, and he's known as a father of the modern dispensationalism, and which means what is modern dispensationalism? It is the future restoration of the earthly kingdom of the nation of Israel. And he was part of a organization called the Plymouth Brethren. So his ideas were very when in Christianity it's always happened is they've distorted, they've changed the text, and they have given the revised, and they've written the Bible, basically a lot of it they've changed it. A lot of people have written, and there's so many versions of it. So his ideals, these were his ideas. And then he believed that the Christic and Mosaic covenants are both valid and coexisting covenants. Like God promised to Jesus and God promised to Moses. So now he brings this ideology. They're both valid and they're both coexisting. Now, what do the normal Christians believe? That the Jews are the ones who killed the Jesus, and Jesus was not from Jesus was a believer, and the Jews were the ones who killed him, so they were not the believers. And they believe the believers of the Old Testament, they're like that. But then these people, he changed it, and he said they're both coexisting, they're both valid. And so what happened later on was Darby's theology, that he was in Europe. So his job, through some conferences and through some other people, his theology finds his popularity in America in the early 20th century. And by this, how did it find popularity? By the circulation of a Scofield Bible. So now there's a lot of people involved in this as well. And there's a guy called Scofield who was not known for a good character, but somehow he joins the society and he writes this with the support and money of a lot of people. Someone was funding him and supporting him, and he wrote this Bible called the Scofield Bible, in which he changed so many things, and he wrote, rewrote the verses of the Bible, and he wrote the side notes, and he completely changed the meanings of a lot of things, which basically gave birth to the idea of Christian Zionism, that the Christians have to support the idea of the children of Israel returning to the land of Palestine. In the land of Palestine, they have to return, and then the future kingdom will be restored. So now, what was his idea was that, as I told you about the dual covenant theology. So the both covenants, or Mosaic and Christic covenants, are both valid, right? They're both correct. And when Jesus returns to rule over Israel, everyone will eventually believe in him. So that was his theology. So everyone's eventually going to believe in him. So there, you are right and we are right, and we both have. You're going to, you have to do something to take over the land. So this is to take over the land was not obviously in his teaching, but this is what gave birth, and this was very popular in Christian Protestants and evangelicals in America, and it changed. Sorry. And this Bible changed the generation of Protestants to Christian Zionists. So this is like this became very popular. This was the Bible that was written by such a person. I mean, you read about Scofield. He's such a, he was drunk. He was very alcoholic, and he was he would take bribes, and he was very, very corrupt and this type of person. But then he wrote this book, and then it's very popular. It's being taught everywhere, and whoever is interested can read research further on this. And then, yes, so this was about John Nelson Darby and Scofield and for the modern dispensation. Now we know where the roots of Christian Zionism came from. And then later on, this was, they used how they convinced the powers in Europe. Please move on to the next slide. How they convinced the powers in Europe to and a lot of people, at that time in Russia, there was the Crimean Wars, and there were pogroms that the Jews were killed on a larger scale. So they convinced those Jews that you can have your own state, and you can move on to that, because at that time Jews never thought that we can have our own country, because they were living in Russia. There were a lot of rich Jews, but then obviously the situation came during the World Wars, and before that and after that, they were murdered on a large scale. So they were convinced to go to a place where it's their own country, where they can live freely. And similarly happened in Europe. So you can see whatever was going to happen, the situation was fueling that. So they call it Aliyah. The moving, they're ascending to heaven. So basically they aliyah to the Holy Land. So they have to go to the Holy Land. So it started in Russia, it started in Europe, and a lot of Europe, and we know the Holocaust in Europe. And so they wanted, and a lot of people who wanted to get rid of the Jews, they said we have to solve this Jewish problem. They wanted to get rid of the Jews. So they teamed up, those Christians teamed up with the Jewish and with the Jews, and they said we will give you a land in Middle East. There's a lot of history in this which cannot be covered in this, but I'll just briefly touch a few things that and they said that a lot of these people were basically themselves anti-Semitic. There were some British politicians, and we know how we will, inshallah, in the next one, we will cover also about the Balfour Declaration and everything. So they wanted a Jewish buffer state. Now, these European powers, they wanted, you've learned about Christian Zionism and how they are. And then they wanted a client state, a buffer state in the Middle East, which will work for them. So I've read about the paragraph that I read to you, how British imperialists succeeded where others failed. So that's how they succeeded. And then there was this rise of nationalism, in Arab nationalism, Turkish nationalism, Jewish nationalism. Before that, even Napoleon wanted to, use this ideology and wanted to use the Jews to conquer the Holy Land and move to the Holy Land. But this idea was not popular. But then it found real popularity when Theodor Herzl came. So we are going to discuss Theodor Herzl as well. Theodor Herzl wrote the book. He wrote many books, but he wrote the book Der Judenstaat. So it's a very interesting book if you want to read, where he gave very beautifully, he gave the idea, he wrote a book and he convinced the people that we want to have our own state where we can live freely, we will not be persecuted. Here we are aliens. They always look at us as aliens. We cannot live, have our own state, and we will always be fought and killed in these lands. So before that, they never thought, okay, we can, because there was no they never considered themselves as one nation. They considered themselves as Jews, just a religion. But then with the idea of nationalism, the idea of birth of Israel was formed. Before that, Jews never thought of moving into a state. And even with Theodor Herzl, when he was giving this idea, and then other political powers, they they presented that, okay, they can have a national home, a Jewish national home in Uganda, and then Argentine was given, and then there was other place in Africa and some other places. So it was not necessarily Palestine, but because they thought Palestine is very useful and it could be used by the Western powers, so they this idea of the Jewish identity and the state of Israel was crafted, and it was through propaganda. It was spread in the minds of people by writing books, by radio shows, by programs and everything. And Herzl, by the way, was a very influential person. He was a very social. He had links, and he met everyone. So he also met to. I will talk about the Sultan Abdul Hamid. So he went to meet Sultan Abdul Hamid, and he said, we the Jews will pay all the debt of the. You just give me a minute, please. We the Jews will pay the Ottoman Empire was very weak at that time. It was indebted, so there was a lot of debt. So they said, we will pay the debt for you. We will pay all your debt. Please give us some part of the Holy Land. So he said, I cannot give you. This is not my land. Sultan Abdul Hamid refuted. It's part of history. You can read it. His statement that he said, we cannot give you this land. This land is not mine. This land belongs to the people, and if you are going to take it, you're going to take it otherwise anyway. But I cannot give you this land. Even an inch of this land, I will not give you. So he refused it, and it's also said that the wife Sultan Abdul Hamid was taken off his the seat of caliph was because of he refused, because there were a lot of the politics going on at that time was very the British, they really wanted the Holy Land to take over the Holy Land because of their own interests, and they were using the Jews. So in 1841 initiative, British consul in Damascus, Charles Henry Churchill wrote to Moses Haim, the leader of Jewish community in England, and Palmerston's letter to the ambassador in Istanbul. So allowing Jews to come to Palestine, creation of a buffer state under British control within Ottoman land. So this is a little map of that. And in the 19th century Palestine, European-based religious activity in the Holy Land increased. Various circles in Europe tried to create Jerusalem question. So now you see how this question is raised and how it's put in people's mind and how it's propagated. An internationalization of Jerusalem project emerged. From the return of the Ottomans until World War I, the development of Palestine reflected the rhythm of interaction between Ottoman policies, European penetration, and regional responses. The Ottoman land reforms of 1839 and 1856, allowing non-Ottoman citizens to own land, combined with the political drives of European powers for the religious culture. Now, at that time, Palestine was ruled by Ottomans before the creation of Israel. So they had this, sanjaks, these rules. It's called mutasarrafiyat. They had big districts. So most of the Palestine was in mutasarrafiyat Al-Quds, Al-Sharif, and they had land rules, and at that time they had land rules, and which obviously these lands can't be sold, but these laws were changed, and a lot of land at that time was owned by a few families who were like Lebanese families, but the people used to have autonomy on their land, but they were actually the bigger area were owned by some other rich Arabs at that time. So we will look into it when we talk about Nakba and the State of Israel. Please move on to the next slide. But then this is to just show how then the migration of the Jews was encouraged from all over the world into the land of Palestine. And a Jewish buffer state. An idea of a Jewish client state in Palestine was to become more established following the Crimean Wars. This is to many in Britain, as Clayton put it was ensure a British presence in a strategically vital area. Now, this is the key. Why they want their presence here. We've understood it through, all these sessions. You probably understand it now that this is very strategically vital area. Throughout history, every superpower has exerted its influence. They know power and, influence in this part of the world means power and influence on the whole world. So this is the key. While to the others, the idea of a Jewish client state would constitute a key link and a buffer against the French in the Middle Eastern chain. So now they're fighting their own war. They want power in their own way, and they want to stop the influence of French as well, which is a colony growing alongside them. So they wanted, a state against them as well. And a Jewish client state in Palestine was increasingly seen as vital to British colonial interests, particularly in India. And the same idea was echoed by others as Thomas Clark in 1861. India and Palestine, or the restoration of the Jews, viewed in relation to the nearest route to India. So now they're finding, because they're making their own British colony grow, they want, from Britain, from Europe, they want a smallest, shortest route where they can reach to India, and they want all the countries on the way under their control. And the struggles, there's a lot of important characters in this. About the very mysterious popular character of what's his name? Just skipped my name. He's very popular, who made his headquarters in Wadi Rum in Jordan, and he wrote a book, The Seven Pillars. Anyone remembers the name of him? Okay, please move on to the next slide. Yeah, hey, I mentioned Theodor Herzl and Sultan Abdul Hamid's conversation. I think that's the end of it. Inshallah, we'll touch on these things a bit more when we talk about the creation of the State of Israel. And we're going to talk a little bit about Bible and colonialism, how it was used, how the text has always been used and exploited throughout history to, take over the land, to, kill and pillage the people, to rape and murder and spill blood, because they think it's coming from the book. We can do whatever we want. And then Bible and Colonialism is another book that was written by Michael Pryor. So, and someone wanted the name of the book. Which book they wanted? Any questions, please? Anyone who wants to ask question can ask.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I have two questions.
Sure.
So the first one is that I'm sorry, I quite missed a few sessions in the middle, so I'm not sure. But I heard the term intellectual nakba.
Okay.
So I would like to ask that whether it starts from the times of Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi, when you refer to this term, what is the you would say the root of this,
No, this is not a term that has been coined in the books. I mentioned that my teacher used it to explain, or basically you can say to name a crisis, the current crisis, the contemporary crisis that has befallen the Muslim world, that they are very, he also mentioned that, if we Muslims will frown if you even talk about Khilafah or Jihad and these topics. And the intellectual nakba is basically, we have lost this war in the books and in the in the intellectual realm. We're not convinced. We are so behind. So it's our ideology and mentality that's very inferior. So this whole concept, he called it intellectual nakba. Nakba is basically disaster, catastrophe. So he said this catastrophe, this intellectual catastrophe, is far bigger than the actual catastrophe that befell the Muslims and the Christians and the Muslims of the people of Palestine. So this was the whole idea. I think it should be clear.
The idea is clear, but I'm asking if you would refer to a specific time.
No,
in the history.
I mentioned it was never used before. It was a term that was coined by my teacher. He stipulated it to explain it.
Yes, I think I'm not able to put my question out. But if you're let's say
when intellectual nakba actually started, you mean?
Yeah, when do you think in the history, or when do you think the time that it was basically coming to be?
For our times, I would say it would be the colonial age. when we were colonized, do you not do you think the roots of our real the way we think and act now, and the way we interact to the world, the way we do a lot of things, it's basically rooted in colonialism. And the times Ottoman Empire was falling apart, Muslims were getting weaker and weaker. And when you read the poetry of Allama Iqbal, you can feel that a lot of it was already there. So he was in the time of colonial time. Do you have you ever read Iqbal? I hope, I assume that you have.
Yeah, definitely.
So we can see the pain in his writings. The Ottoman Empire is falling, and the colonial, the you can say the tyrants, and whatever we were suffering. So we used to study Arabic, in India and Pakistan as well. People were very well familiar with Arabic. It was not very something that was alien. So we gave up studying Arabic. Actually, it was taken from us, but we never retrieved it. Now when we took our own independent country, we never thought to learn Arabic, to put it as a main language, to study Islam the way traditionally was taught. So a lot of it, I see the roots of it in the colonialism. But obviously, whenever any nation gets weaker, so it's step by step. So it's not just happened once, it happened a lot of times in history. But to our contemporary age, I can see the roots of it in colonialism.
Right. I have another question if you have time.
Sure.
So, when we speak about I just want your opinion that when you read the books or the history or the books written by Theodore Herzl, right? So, do you think he was presenting like some sort of modern Zionism, but it was more secular, not he
I think I've forgot to mention. Thank you for reminding me. Theodor Herzl was a secular person. He was propagating nationalism, Jewish nationalism.
Right.
He was not
Right.
giving
So
any
it was
religious idea. Yeah.
perfect. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
he
you.
was not presenting any religious idea. And I think I forgot to mention that the original, it's coming in the next one as well, that the founders of the Zionism, the people who started Zionism were actually secular Jews. And that's how they
Yes.
even won the support of democratic West. So they say we are going to be democracy. And he wrote in his book Judenstaat that Israel, our country, the future state, Jewish state, he calls it, Jewish state is not going to be a theocracy. Right? He writes about, we will keep our rabbis in the confines of the synagogue, and in the law, like he gave an example as well. So he did not want a theocracy. Now this idea later become popular. The Jewish Zionism got popular with the extreme religious wing, which also led, I wanted to include this in today's presentation, but it gets really lengthy. So I thought I'll touch at some other point. When there was a Dr. Goldstein, Dr. Moshe, what was his full name? Something Goldstein. And he was the one behind the shootings of, there was a Christian Zionist from Australia who had come to live in this Holy Land. And you can imagine what his ideology was. So he goes on and he shoots the people in Ibrahimi Mosque, which is Hebron, in Al-Khalil, city of Al-Khalil. It's a big Muslim mosque. And they were shooting, and he kills almost, I think, tens of people there who were praying Salah at that time, I think Salatul Jummah at that time, and he kills them. And that's when it really struck, it came on the headlines, and that's when it was a sign of Jewish, religious Zionism finding its place in the mainstream. And since the 80s, it has found its place in the mainstream. The people that were considered just on the fringes now had found their way in the mainstream. And now the Israeli ministers, they are religious extreme, and they're called the Messianic Jews, who believe in the revival of the Messianic age, the coming back of Jesus, the coming back of their Messiah. So I've told you that the covenants, now it basically started with the Mosaic covenant and Christic covenant, both are valid. Now they say their Messiah will come when they will do this. And they want to revive that age. this idea found its way into the mainstream. Now, a lot of things that are happening in with the Jewish settlers, they're coming, they're going, they're burning the houses, they're taking the hilltop places, using text from the Bible. There's actually a documentary made by TRT. It's called The Holy Redemption. It's very interesting. Holy Redemption, it's called. So it tells you about this very part, how they're exploiting this text, and it tells you about the settler organization, the extreme religious Zionist settler organizations. They just want to take as much as land, and Israel wants to take as much as land as possible, and they're using these religious Zionists to, basically lose hell. They break hell. They break, the hell. How do you say? On the people of the Palestine. They go take over the land, they take over the places. They're living in the, on the hills in the Palestinian villages, and they just take over everything. They burn their properties as well. In Hawara, it happened, a very sad incident, and a lot is happening. And I think there was another documentary that I said, it's by Al Jazeera. It's called Praying for Armageddon. So there's two parts to it. It's very interesting, and you will understand now that you know the context of it. So how there's a lot of the millions and millions of evangelical Christians in America who pray and who support the idea of this state of Israel. And the return, they think their Messiah will return when all the Jews will gather. It's a very bloodthirsty ideology, to be honest. And they believe when all the Jews will, gather in the Holy Land, Israel, and then they also believe that they will be killed eventually, and then some of them will believe in Messiah, our real Messiah. So that's why they believe in the return of the Jews in the Holy Land, and that's why they get their support from America, because they're organizations like Kufi, Christian United for Israel, and led by there's this very hypnotic kind of pastor, John Hagee. And you should actually listen how he speaks. So, and then there's the organization that lobbies for Israel is AIPAC. You've heard probably of AIPAC, right, in this context, in this American election context as well. How President Trump was, heavily funded, and his whole campaign was supported by this Zionist Miriam. She's a billionaire. She's a Jewish billionaire who supports this idea of Israel, and they fund their thingy. They fund their movement, the whole election campaigns to just bring about the gathering of Israel, all the Jews in Israel. So yeah, thank you for asking this question. A lot of that was not covered in this presentation has been covered in the question. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you for answering. Thank you so much.
No problem. Is there anything else, or shall we just conclude? I think there's no more questions. Is there any question in the chat, Mahdeen? Okay. If there's no more questions, inshallah, we will end the meeting. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.